Welcome in, everybody. 5 minutes with Sean, maybe 10. I am on a run of sitting down with other folks right now. The last 2 weeks, you would have been inundated with SEO madness from my man, Dale Roddy. Few know it better. I hope you guys really enjoyed that. Now, while the SEO part is fun, everyone knows at my heart I am a car dealer. I look out for car dealers. I advocate on their behalf, and I love hearing and telling their stories. And today's story, I hope you all got your pen, your paper, you got enough room on your phones to take notes, because today's story isn't just a story of a dealer. It's more than that. It's a story of a man who, in his own words, had nothing else but the car business, and then it wasn't anymore. So without further ado, let's bring in Jim True. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm doing good, Sean. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I am excited to have you. We've been having a lot of communication, you and I. We've been doing a lot of texting and talking back and forth. I jokingly even had to consult my legal team before I had you on because of the nature of our discussion. So I'm excited. So what I like to do, I know we've got a big thing to cover here, and we're gonna do this over a 2-episode time period, folks. So if you missed episode 1, don't worry, you'll be able to catch them both and binge on it. But Jim, why don't you tell us, where does the car business origin story for you begin?
Well, luckily for me, and I say luckily just because I've been very fortunate, and I had a natural gift at a very young age. My upbringing was, I would say, I'd love to say non-existent, but it really was sad. We were just like dirt poor. We went without basic survival needs. One of 7 kids, the whole story. My biological dad was an alcoholic that left us, got up and went to work one Friday, and we didn't see him again for years. So my mom was stuck with 6 kids outside of town, no driver's license, the whole thing. Anyway, shorten that up. We got moved into a small town, and somehow or another, I really can't go back even in my own mind and remember it. I got hooked up with a guy outside of town that I don't know if he felt sorry for me but anyway, I was 10 years old. This guy had a restoration shop. They restored nothing but old Corvettes and vintage Cadillacs. I was about 10 or 11 years old. So he and his wife, they had only had one son, and this guy kind of took me on, and it was just like 2 peas in a pod. So I worked for him every single day, and moving forward a little more, from being 10 years old, by the time I was 13 years old, I had a paint gun in my hand, and I was actually doing lacquer paint jobs. So it doesn't mean anything to anybody but me, but some of these paint jobs took 3 days to do. I was 13 years old, and these cars were going into shows. I mean, it was a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about working on restoration of the golden age of Corvettes.
Oh yeah,
the golden age of Cadillac. I mean, these are all steel, big old beautiful machines. I mean, what a difference painting steel versus painting plastic, right? So,
and not only that, there were no or very few aftermarket parts. You couldn't buy them.
Right, you had to wait in line. Yep, got it.
Well, and the guys that really had like what they called new old stock, they would take a set of taillights and put them on an old piece of shit car they wanted to get rid of, and take it to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and make you buy the whole car to get the taillights. And then you'd take the taillights and sell their shitty car. I mean, that's how it worked.
Yeah, now we have eBay. We can just buy the taillights without the shitty car.
Well, I'll tell you, there's another little backstory to that. He was actually very close friends. If you've ever heard of a place called Corvette Central,
I have heard
and
of it. I've got
so,
some buddies who are in Corvette clubs. I've heard that name.
well, Jerry Cohn, that founded Corvette Central in 1975-ish, 76-ish, these two were like the best of friends. I knew Jerry personally. I remember when it started. I used to go up there all the time and pick up parts. His son Scott, I mean, they were just phenomenal people. So, like I told you earlier, some of the people I've met in my life and associated with, been around and been close to, it's phenomenal.
Yeah,
So
you did
anyway, the guy,
you did say you have quite the Rolodex, and seemingly
yeah,
by accident, I believe is how you phrased it earlier.
it,
And
it
I love
really, it
that.
really
I love,
is.
yeah, I think it's great. It's awesome. All right, sorry, go ahead.
So as that kind of evolved, the one thing I didn't mention is this same guy that had this business, he was an hourly worker at the steering gear plant for a Motor Company on the east side of Indianapolis. His very best friend was at the time was a foreman or a committeeman. This guy, his best friend, who, I was one of their, they admired me because I was working for $2 a day, so I didn't have to take free lunch. How's that? And they admired the hell out of that because we were the
Who
poorest
wouldn't
family.
admire the hell out of that? Granted, we could never pay someone that anymore, but who wouldn't admire that, Jim? That says a lot. I mean, again, are we still 13, 14 here, or have we?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, no.
Okay. I mean, come
I'm
on.
I'm like I'm a kid.
Yeah.
So this guy at the time, he's just committeeman, whatever he is. Well, he ends up being the president of the 11 UAW at the Indianapolis steering gear plant. And his story, I'll finish real quick. This guy's name is Philip Rose. He was handpicked by none other than Ron Gettelfinger, who was the president of the UAW International for all three, to go to work for the International Union. This guy and all of his friends bought their cars from my dealership until I closed. So this is the guy that sits next to Bill Ford when he goes to see the Detroit Lions, and he's negotiating all these contracts. Hell, this guy's been my best friend since I was 10 years old. Unfortunately, he passed away, I don't know, in 17 or 18, but that was my start. So as I started getting older, they tried to encourage me to go to work at the plant. And, I had my own ticket, but I didn't want to punch that card. I wanted to do my own thing. But none of them were even in the new car business. So after the restoration, my brother and we collision work, towing, recovery. I kept bouncing into the new car business because I don't know. The car business to me, I always summed it up. It's like going to the county fair every day. You got balloons, you got popcorn, you got all the excitement, you got the smell, you got the activity, plus you got all the clowns. So I just fell in love with it, and the more encouraged it. But then I found out how easy it was. You really don't, and that was just be honest and don't cheat. And cheat, it.
Jim, we're having a little bit of audio problem right now.
So, yeah.
We live in a world of technology, Jim, so we got to do our best with what we have, right? So, okay, so what I love, first of all, is the fact that you said that you had a ticket that you could have very well punched at the ripe age of 13, 14, what have you, to go take this gig. But instead, you decided that you'd punch your own and you'd work your own way through it, which says a lot for someone growing up the way you described growing up. I find that to be incredible. What happens next? Do you take the gig at the Ford plant, or do you go into something else?
Well, I did my own thing. I was promised a college education. All I had to do was just finish high school. They were more than willing to take me in the thing to be me. So I could student, but I went here and
Yeah, that could be some of it too. Like I said, the internet connection is a big part of it. So hey, it's technology, Jim. We work with what we got, buddy. All right, so you're moving into your own thing. You said that you were going to do it your own way. You were promised the college education if you finish high school. Tell us what's next.
well, I decided high school wasn't for me, so I quit. And that was in like in the 70s. Yeah, it would have been the late 70s. I was a whole 16 years old, and I wanted to make my own way. So I quit high school, and the day I quit, it was wintertime, and I was cold, and I was tired of that shit. So me and three other kids, we decided we were going to go to Florida. We had a connection there, and hell, I stayed there for a year. So the guy that had the Corvette thing, he somehow or another, and when you're adults, you figure that stuff out. But when you're a kid, you think nobody knows where in the hell I'm at. I don't care. So I had two jobs there. Was working like a dog, and because when we were having the Cuban invasion, which was pretty interesting, being 16 years old from a small town going to Miami, we literally could walk from where we were living to Miami-Dade University. So we had a lot of fun. Anyway, I get a call from this guy at a payphone. I don't remember how all that got orchestrated, but he told me, he said, son, you got two choices. He said, you can be a man and you can come back the same way you left, or in the next 2 weeks, when you least expect it, I'm going to snatch your ass up and you're coming home with me. So I did. I came home and I moved in with them. Lived in their basement. And of course, at that time, the factory thing wasn't as appealing. And then he got into the union and he became the steering gear plant, which was everything about the union now, and they talk about mobsters and all this stuff. I have been in the same room with all of these people, and they're not mobsters. All I ever heard was there's no such thing as a mob. So they were all great people, and I didn't take any of those offers up, and I just continued my direction. I guess you'd say own car restoration, building wrecks, and getting a start in life. And the $2 a day moved to what I consider to be minimum wage and 2 fish heads a week, and that was plenty. So I did that and sold cars. And anytime I had extra money, I either invested in a house or bought an old house and fixed it up, rented it, moved out, and that was my start. And it was interesting. The one thing that always this unmeasurable amount of support from people that knew me, cared about me, and they could have dumped just a little bit of money in things and made everything really good for me. And so having that option and not using it, that's life. That's just who I am, and that's how I like it. So with that, I came back and I took a job washing cars, and the economy went to hell, and we were all paying a ton of money and interest on and my first full-time job in a dealership was washing cars for $98 a week. And I was so happy because I worked for the guy for a couple weeks, and he said, I really appreciate a young man like you, and you're working hard, and I know a little bit about your family. And he said, I'm going to give you a raise. I thought, damn, this is great. He said, you really do a nice job on my white walls. The following week, after that raise, I was taking home about $16 less a week. So the following Monday, I had to go to his office. Never forget to go. I went in and I said, Mr. Hall, I need a favor. He said, Jim, he said, what do you need? He said, I'll do what I can for you. He said, what's the problem? I sat down and I said, Mr. Hall, I said, I appreciate that raise you gave me. He said, well, you deserved it, son. I said, there's only one problem. He said, what's that? I said, you think you could take it back? He said, what in the hell are you talking about? I said, I need you to take it back. He said, I've never heard. And I said, it put me in the next tax bracket, and I need $16 a week. I showed him the check stub, and he looked at it, and he goes, I'll be damned. He said, I've never had anybody happier about taking a raise back than getting one in the first place. And he did. He went in and took that raise back, man, you know. I spent some time there. My brother's been extremely successful. I'm really proud of him. He's a great guy. He's a body shop in a small town. That dealership at that time, and I want to say in the 90s, from when he bought it, the previous owner had it in his family since it was a livery stable. So it was really old. My brother just crushed it. I mean, the first month we sold every car. So I kind of went to the city where I felt like I could be appreciated. People in the city didn't know how to react when I'm pretty fair complected, pretty clean cut, foul mouth, but clean cut, you know, hold your tongue kind of thing. It was amazing the amount of people that I a brochure and sell them a car. And they loved me. You know,
I bet.
I didn't know any better but to do things extremely well and do it right, because that's just who I am. So I had my own, and a lot of this I do have to give a lot of credit to somebody that he's going to freak out when he hears it, but Jim Ziegler. I met him.
The Alpha Dog. Is that who we're talking about right now, Jim?
Oh, dude. I would tell you, I've seen some really great speakers, but that guy captivated me. But you got to remember, so going to the city and going even in a big building, and I don't remember even his Market Square Arena, but it's been that long ago, and he really was. God damn, I hate to say this, but he was really young, really young.
That's
So when
Alpha
he was
Dog.
in
I mean,
Indy, I went and listened.
he's been doing it forever, right? He's been all over the place.
Dude.
Yeah.
I show up at the dealership one day and they tell me I get this, you know, send me, you still there?
Go ahead. Someone sends you to go do the despicable deed. Yep.
Whenever somebody sent me to do that, you know, I always ended up meeting like the most famous person in the world. And it doesn't mean shit because chances are that person didn't even know me or see me or whatever, but I was there, I was present. And anytime I went to something like that, I kept in mind that, there were always the captive listeners and the people that wanted to be there. And man, I wanted a front row seat. I wanted to participate because that was my ticket. That's the stuff that was going to keep food in my stomach and make me successful. So that's kind of how I got started in the car business, and then I had another really good friend that took up to me, and a little bit older. By the time I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was ready to get into a dealership. I wanted that life, but I didn't know what it was until I got in it.
It's one of those things people don't realize till they're actually in it. I love the fact that you have a callback to the to Jim Ziegler, the Alpha Dog, though. Like, I love that that's the case. I love the fact that he would have motivated you to, see the business differently or to appreciate it differently. I think is outstanding, and really speaks to a testament of how small our industry actually is, for the most part. For those of you just tuning in, had to go to a little audio only format here. Internet's just being a pain in the ass today, so we're gonna go to have the best sound quality, hear Jim's story all the way through. This is what we're doing. Jim, so you're 18, 19 years old. You're in the car business. How do you get involved with new cars?
I gotta say that I grew into it by age, and association with people. Um, Even at that age, I've always been like really conservative with money. Um, I guess being young and going hungry and having that hunger pain, I'm not being funny about it. It was a literal pain. I always had that fear of not being able to eat or being cold or something. Eh, eh, That's the stuff that breaks my heart, and that's a for real pain. So I've been ultra conservative, and I knew I couldn't afford it. I could afford a car or a new car, but I wouldn't. And that was my thing. So when I got leaned into that new car business, at that point it was a job, but I was extremely good at what I was going to do. I'd mastered um, ultimately being able to work with other people, be a team leader, the importance of keeping people or making people happy. And my thought was, if you really went at it with under promise and over deliver, and I don't mean that in a sense where you promise too little and then it's easy to over deliver. I promised what they expected, and I exceeded every expectation they humanly possibly could have. So, getting into the new car business for a Toyota store, uh, east side of Indianapolis, I have it somewhere because I remember customer satisfaction index. I think I sold cars for less than a year. In the first month, I know that I had 2 wholesalers that said, "You're too damn smart to be selling cars. You need to be in management." So, I didn't want that, but my customer satisfaction index, and I have this sheet because I keep that stuff. I wanna say that the store, and this was like a phenomenal store, family owned and still is, and a great family. Their store index probably was 98%. I wanna say mine for that period was 99.9%, and that was just how I did things. Nothing's perfect, and I'm not any better than anybody else, and God knows I make mistakes, but, I think even when you make a mistake, if you own it, it's pretty easy to get people to see that you were, you may have only completed 99.9% of it, but you were 110% there.
Yeah, I mean, especially being present during the sale of a car, right? Like it's one of those things I think people take for granted. A lot of people talk about, at least when I was in the business, right? They're like, "Oh, this is someone's, the second biggest purchase of their life." Well, today's world, it could be the first. And I think we need to have respect for that. And that's what I always did. I tried to always put myself in the shoes of the customer and what would they would expect? What would they want next? And I love the fact that you talk about satisfactory to you being a big part. So when people start pushing you to management, what is your initial thought?
Well, I was at a time where most of the salespeople had tassels on their shoes that were probably 10 years older than me. And most of their shoes looked like they were 20 years older than me. So it was a weird time because there was still a lot of abusive behavior.
I mean, this is
Um,
the 80s of the car business, right, Jim?
well, I probably was 90s before, as I got old enough to get into the new car stores and be a professional.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. So 90s, still 90s car business. I grew up late 90s car business, Chicago. I mean, it was not pleasant. It's not.
now, in the late 90s, I was coming to Chicago to the auction. I was, let's see, mid 90s, I was traveling from Indiana, Florida, Chicago, Detroit, Lexington every week, buying and selling cars. So my 90s stint when I got in, I mean, it was like you said, some really shady stuff, man. I mean, it was the deal. Um, I'll tell you, the things that helped me the most is, and believe it or not, I'm not very well organized and I have attention deficit, but I also have this adrenaline thing. Um, and it gives me some sort of capability at that time. Seriously, if I had my head on straight, I could go 2 or 3 days and never go to bed, not close my eyes or anything, just work my ass off. And that's what I did.
Well, I mean, now that it could be a good thing, especially obviously keep yourself busy. But at the end of the day, we do need to find a way to recharge, Jim, replenish, even if we're young, right? But when we're selling cars, I mean, I'm selling cars in Chicago, late 90s. I mean, I stayed awake for 3 days for a different reason. You know what I mean?
I can't say that there wasn't a little different going on, but I I was pretty. And don't get me wrong, there's no chance that during this show that I'm gonna be sprouting angel wings. It's just not gonna happen, dude. Uh,
Yeah, no, that's not what this show had. This show hasn't
yeah,
produced a
no,
lot of those.
no. My ass laid on the cement and on the asphalt and howled at the moon, and I'm like a two-time loser in the whole marriage thing. And my thing is divorce is so expensive because it's fucking worth it. You know? Hey,
Oh,
third.
that's
I
that, that
have the love of my life now, and I'll tell you what, she's incredible, incredible. I didn't even know that it existed. So
it's amazing what you can do with an amazing partner, isn't it, Jim?
it really is because she ended up being a really big part of this dealership, and 30-year school teacher, and I give her hell since I didn't finish school. She's a third grade teacher. Make it short, she's 30 years next year, third grade. I told her, I said, you know what? I did the third grade in 3 years flat. And what pisses me off is they're going to pay you retirement. And the only thing I ever got was moved to the next harder grade. I'm not happy about that.
That's awesome. That's
Best
awesome.
3 years of my life, I tell her.
The third grade, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Oh,
That
yeah.
explains that explains why you're so far ahead of everyone else, though, as you grow up.
Well, yeah. I always went out the top. But anyway, you know, in that 90s, there was a lot of there was a lot of mental health issues, a lot of abusive everything. But I kind of stayed the course. and as I stayed the course, I became a really, really, really sharp used car guy. And, I've got some background with paint and that type of stuff. So I could walk by a car and just smell fresh paint. That was just me. And then I became, without any organizational skills and attention deficit and all this adrenaline, I became what I felt like a master at the desk.
A
So,
master at the desk. Before we get to that, the only trick I ever learned from a Chicago car guy, used car guy about paint was the old run the fingers under the closed part of the hood near the glass.
oh yeah,
Right. And if it's rough, it's been repainted. If it's smooth, it's from the factory. Right. And it was just the easiest trick. And no one does the silent walk around anymore, Jim.
oh,
No one takes the time for a solid, silent, pointing my finger, sticking it in the tires. You know what I mean?
that's
Really taking a
that's
look.
the only it's the only way I buy them.
Uh,
Even in 2019, I, if I went to the auction, now even as a dealer, I bought my own cars. I didn't take a book. I mean, that just it defeated the purpose. The book was just a distraction. If you found the right car, my theory is you can never pay too much for the right car, but you damn sure can never pay too little for the wrong one. So, with all my experience, I, I walked around every car. I know tires. I was hands on in that. So,
so you
a
become a
buddy of mine.
master of the desk.
Oh
Your
yeah.
deals, you got lease deals, you got whatever working. You're mastering the desk. What
Oh
happens?
yeah.
What happens after you master the desk? What do you start to get the feel for?
I went into the desk, and then I ended up in Metro City, Indianapolis, in a big dealership, but pretty high volume. And we had some turnover with salespeople and management. And one of the funniest things and today I kind of clicked again, was seeing some of this 96 month and people talking about rates and stuff. Back then, we were just edging into 66 months financing. And I was the desk manager uh, for a big store. And we just hired another sales manager to come in and help me. So at that time, I'm still calculating leases with a lease calculator and a piece of paper. You remember those?
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
You know,
I used to joke it was like an abacus for a sales manager. Yeah, I know what you
oh
mean.
yeah, I've got all my lease worksheets and all this stuff, and I'm trying to listen to everything going on the floor. And I hear this guy. He was older. I shouldn't say older, because back then I'd say older, but now, hell, I just turned 62, so it probably wasn't older at this point. Anyway, he's just, the salesperson was mishandling this thing, and the customer was upset. They were getting to his payment, but he was not fond of 66 months, and you remember how it was. They're just doing everything but turning you upside down by your ankles. I didn't like that stuff, so I was watching, and I go over to save this poor old guy. So I thought, and I'm really getting the hang of the desk, and really being a great floor manager, and I'm over soothing this guy out. And I felt like I was just king of the free world when I walked back to the tower, and I watched them all shake hands. And I thought, man, I really solved that issue. And you know I'm really going to be good at this. And this guy picks his car up and all this stuff, and several weeks later, I got this new manager. He's coming along, and this guy comes back, and he didn't bother to open the doors on the showroom. I don't think. It's just like he busted right through, and he was yelling and screaming, and "You son of a bitch," and all this stuff. He's shaking his hand up in the air. This guy had a payment book. They And this was how it was. They put him in F&I, and they got him all wound up on 66 months. And of course, back then you used to get your payment book. a month later.
Yeah, for sure, from the bank.
He
Yeah.
comes in with this. He comes in with this payment book, 66 months, and the sales manager, and I'm being all crafty about, oh shit, now I'm gonna get put to the test of how do I control the showroom, a big ass showroom in the city. So he walks over to this guy, and I'm thinking he's gonna kill him, but he's just right in his face. And this new sales manager, he was just the calmest person I ever seen, and it was just like, he goes, "Sir," he said, "you don't understand. That's a mistake." He takes the guy's payment book, and the guy says, "Look, I told you no 66 months. You son of a bitch. You're a bunch of crooks." And then he starts going off on this stuff. So this new sales manager walks over to a desk. He said, "I've been telling them about this forever." He picks up the phone, pushes a few buttons, don't know who and what he's doing or how he's doing it. I'm watching the guy. He goes, "We need to have a meeting about these payment books. We've talked about this, and the damn printer is still sending these things out with 66 months." So he slams the phone down, looks at the guy. "Sir, I'm so sorry." Takes the book. He tears out 6 payments in the back of the book. Tears out those 6 payments and tears them up, throws them in the trash. Tells this guy that it was our printer's fault. And he was able to soothe this guy down to the point that they were almost kissing when the old man left. And I'm standing there, I'm watching. I mean, I'm feeling dirty myself. So I'm like, what in the hell just happened? He goes, "I solved that problem." I said, "What do you mean you solved that problem?" He said, "That old son of a bitch will never figure that out. And when he does, we're both going to be gone." I looked at him and I really, really wanted to just break his nose. And instead of that, I thought about it for a minute. And he sits down and he's going on telling all the salespeople how he just handled that and don't worry about it, guys. 66 months, not a big deal. I looked at him and I said, "You know what?" I said, "Have you called your wife today?" He said, "My wife? Why would I call her?" I said, "Because you're going to need a fucking ride home. Get out." That was the first time I ever fired anybody. I was dreading it. He goes, "Why would I call my wife?" I said, "Because you're going to need a fucking ride home. Get out."
Yeah, baby, I love it. Take him to task. No, when you're telling that story, I've been down a similar road before in Chicago, and I felt the same way where I was like, this isn't really happening, is it? We're not really gonna. And because when I got into it, we were starting to edge into 84 months, Jim. Okay, so I mean, think about those terms. Think about
There's
the
no way.
Bayview banks of the world, right? I mean, geez, Louise.
We were
I
just
mean,
seeing 66 at that time. And,
that was like 84
that,
in my time for sure.
but see, that came from the 60-month thing. Really, it came from 48 months where people came in with 20% down. When I really started going into showrooms, people came in with their title in their shirt pocket. They were proud that they were going to be buying a car. It really was a great experience all the way around. They'd cruised your lot and they'd been looking in the window and we were trying to hide the cars or whatever it might be. Um, they had their title in their pocket and they had their 20% down and they were only going to finance 36, 40 months, whatever it was, and with their local bank. An extended warranty was non-existent.
Right. It was anything F&I was making was probably rate.
Well, a lot of them were just getting flats.
Yeah, I was gonna say most of it, if even before rate was just a flat. Yeah, I mean, look, Jim, I don't know about you. I don't know if you spent any time in finance, but that was the worst 9 months of my life.
You know what? I had to do a year in finance because I was on this collision course with becoming a dealer, and I wanted all the steps, and I went in
I know,
for a
me too.
year.
That's why I put up with it for 9 months, and I absolutely hated it.
Well, here's my thought on it. I'm one step past that. I don't like F&I, and I don't fucking like anybody that does.
Except for
There's something.
Jim Ziegler.
If Jim's really good at F&I probably wouldn't even like him.
Yeah, no,
You
he's
have to
great,
have a
man.
certain amount of larceny about you. You
I,
really
I
do.
just, it is something. I have a great friend of mine who's a finance director in Colorado, a multi-group store, and I always tell him, like, man, your house is bigger than mine, but I'm not sure how you sleep at night.
You know what they usually say? Quite well, thank you.
Yeah, no, they do. I used to say when I was younger, people would ask me when I was in the car business, and you take advantage of people. How do you sleep at night? I said, on a big pile of money. Why don't you fuck off?
Yeah.
But again, we all have arrogance about it. So Jim, we've laid the groundwork here, and we're gonna wrap up. This is part one. We're gonna wrap that up here. But this story does not have a happy ending, does it, Jim?
I look at it like this, Sean. It didn't have a happy ending, but with anything in life, I've been handed some pretty bad cards, and if you don't like the size or the big picture, make the son of a bitch bigger, and that's really my goal. But no, it didn't have a good ending, and there were a lot of people that got hurt. Community, me personally, I don't give a shit. I'm over it. But I'm going to teach you a lesson.
And that's what I love about your attitude. I love your attitude about that there is more ahead, and there is going to be a silver lining out of the way this whole thing ended.
I absolutely guarantee it.
I love it. I
'Cause
love it. All
I'm
right,
one of
everybody.
those.
That is going to wrap up the first section of our talk with Jim True. We are going to come back at you next week. Again, audio only format here. It's a bit of a bummer, but it is the way life operates. So, Jim, thank you so much for making the first episode happen, and I look forward to hearing the rest of the story.
All right, Sean. Like I said, man, I'm really humbled, and you have a great show, and you guys do a lot of good things, and I'm really thankful.
Well, we're glad you decided to tell your story on our show, man. We appreciate that. All right, everybody, tune in next week for the unbelievable conclusion of Jim True, the former Ford dealer. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week.